Thank you for the chance to share my spiritual practice of grappling with life through music. I wrote that song to feel about how hard it is to put yourself first, or to take care of yourself, or to ask for support. And that video came at a time around the new year, but I still feel this way, where people were exhausted. And I wanted to invite my friends, and you saw some UUs in there, you saw some Austin musicians and justice activists, some friends. I wanted to invite people just to lie down for a minute, just to see how it feels to take a moment. And so that's become a meditation on that effort and how it's not easy to do that. I want to invite you into a time together to think and feel and be about what it is to care for each other and what it is to face difficult things as a community. I want to begin with a quote from disability activist Mia Mingus. She writes, "Because burnout is largely rooted in ableism, reprioritizing access, rest, capacity, challenging the things that lead to burnout is a form of disability justice." So prioritizing access, rest, capacity is a form of disability justice. What barn raising activities do, they say to us that the myth of bootstrapping it, of going it alone, is not the way. And that we lighten the load and we do more and we live fiercely when we do it together. You heard a little bit in Rusty's voice from the essay from Abani Jones about community care. And I want to share a little bit more of that with you. But first, I want to let you know that in the course of talking about the joys of doing things together, I'm also going to be talking about some difficult topics: depression, anxiety, mental health struggles, and even suicide. These are things that have been exacerbated by the pandemic, and they can be hard to talk about and very personal. And I'm not going to be able to cover it all in one homily, not even close. But I just hope to open some conversations about those things today and to share some spiritual resources with you. Just giving you that note, because if things like depression, anxiety, or suicide are close to home for you, check in with your body during this time and listen to your body and your spirit about what you need while I'm talking, and trust yourself, okay? So in that essay on community care that Abani Jones wrote, she says, "Something important I've realized as my depression has gotten worse is that, contrary to my shame, many members of my community are more than happy to carry that burden with me. After an initial Facebook comment, I started to receive messages and texts saying, 'How can I best support you?' This has become my favorite question," Jones writes. "It's the first one I always ask whenever someone I know is struggling. I don't do this because I feel guilty," she says, "or because I feel like I need to repay them for care they've given me. I do it because I want to, because it feels good and I love my people. And sometimes it's part of the movement work that I'm best at." She says, "My community members take care of me for the same reason. It brings them joy. It gives them purpose. And maybe it's the only, quote, movement work that they are capable of too, for whatever reason. Taking care of ourselves, surviving and thriving, as self-care rhetoric reminds us, is a radical act. And so is taking care of each other." And I think so many times, that is the end of the excerpt from Jones, I think so many times we feel bad to ask for help. And I want, if you are someone, and we all do this, I think sometimes, but if you are someone who feels bad to ask for help, I want you to pause in that feeling. Remember the words of Mia Mingus that we are disability justice advocates when we are breaking down that stigma of asking for help. And ask yourself, what are you modeling for other people who might need help? If you're not up for asking for it, if you feel shame to ask for it, imagine yourself a role model for someone else who is learning to ask for help. So I again want to applaud Alex and Liz for letting people know that there was something they could do for them. And the joy that I know people who came to help them move. Moving is not fun, usually, if you do it in a certain way. You know, if someone is reaching out to you to ask for help moving, the first reaction might not be, this sounds like fun, but it can be when you bring that spirit of connection and love to the effort. And so I want to share another story, and this is where the title of our service comes from, about Baby, We Need a Barn Raising, about something very similar, although the motives were different. A woman named Sheila Kathleen generously shared her experience in a Twitter thread, and her Twitter handle is @SheilaKathleen with a K. And this relates to, again, those struggles of depression that many of us face, and that I think maybe no family, no community is untouched by. Sheila writes, the year after my dad died was so bad that I don't remember 90% of it. I moved to a new apartment and was unable to unpack for months. I was ashamed I couldn't unpack. How can you be unable to unpack? She writes. But her good friend David, that she'd known since high school, was aware of her struggle, and he felt helpless. I think we've felt that, all of us, before, when we know someone is struggling and we don't know what to do. David said to Sheila, you are loved. We need you. And Sheila said, I was like, doesn't matter, but thanks. Then David took a risk. And Sheila says, it very well could have ended badly. She says, I could have lashed out. I could have been really offended. And when we talk about these barn raising gestures that we make, we know we need to take, or that we want to be aware that we do take a risk, right? So Sheila says, David sent out an email to a group of local friends without her knowledge and said, quote, Sheila is struggling. She needs our help. Let's go over there and unpack her apartment for her. Bring food. Let's make it fun. Now, I love that David said that, okay? He didn't just say, let's go over there and unpack. He said, bring food, let's make it fun. That's church hospitality right there. That's how we welcome people. And in the pandemic, that's been a challenge, right? We haven't been able to get together with a classic Unitarian Universalist potluck or the coffee. So we're thinking about how we get back to doing that in person. But bring food, let's make it fun. And Sheila says, at the end of the night, she looked at her friend's husband, and Sheila describes him as a quiet, taciturn guy who drives a tugboat on the Hudson, if you can picture him. A man of few words, she says. And she looked at him speechless, not knowing how to say thank you to this tough, resilient, self-sufficient man. And let me pause Sheila's words right there. Remember what I said last week? We're always comparing our insides to other people's outsides. Let's remember that Sheila perceives him as a tough, resilient, self-sufficient man, but we don't know what he has struggled with to show up. So maybe there's more to him than that, but that's her perception of him. He looked at her, saw the look on her face, and understood, and said to her, listen, baby, what we did today was a barn. And I love that response. It says so much in a few words. Listen, baby, what we did today was a barn raising. Sheila says that in 4 hours, they turned her place into a home. Not everything was put away, but here's the important part. She says she had a memory attached to it, a group memory, something that transcends her depression, of friends, of laughter, of dirty jokes, she says, of hard work. She says, these are the kind of friends I have and the kind of friend I want to be to others. I ask you to think about that right now, just to take a moment, maybe to recognize or give gratitude in your heart for a friend, for someone maybe in this church, maybe somewhere else, maybe they're long gone by now. Maybe you're still longing to see them again. But someone who has been that kind of friend to you. Maybe just pause and think their face or their name, or share their name in the chat and let us lift them up with you. I'm just going to pause for a few moments of quiet for those people. May we be able to be those people for others too. A key thing in Sheila's story is that she had been struggling, and I don't want to overlook that. This has been a really hard year and a half. Sheila's story comes from well before the pandemic, but it reminds me of what it's been like over here. For people to have been alone, for us to not really know what's going on in other people's homes unless we have something like a connections group and people are willing to share. And I want to lift up a key piece that Sheila doesn't mention in her description. In order for her friend David to know that she was struggling like that, in order for him to take that risk, she did have to give some kind of signal. And so it's hard. But if you're struggling right now, I pray for you to be able to find the strength to give some kind of signal. And then for those of us who have the capacity to receive such a signal right now, may we really be looking for them. May we be seeking them, because it's hard to give them. When you are struggling with depression or anxiety, or even suicidal ideation, it can be very hard to give that signal. So those of us who are not in that boat at the moment also need to be listening and looking really hard with our deepest hearts. I want to share with you one of the resources that I think has been so nourishing around this topic. It's a book called Not Alone by Monica Coleman. She's a Black womanist theologian, and in this book, Not Alone, she offers 40 days of devotions on depression. And they are very short chapters that can be read in a couple of minutes, following with a question to ponder or journal over something simple, like who in your life can handle your truth, or what songs express how you feel. Because when you're struggling with depression or anxiety, when I have struggled with grief, sadness, sorrow, I don't have the energy to read a big book. Don't give me a big book, but a short little devotion like Monica Coleman's book, Not Alone, can be that spark of inspiration perhaps in your day. Monica Coleman describes how depression has made her believe things that are factually untrue, that knows her, that no one really knows her, that no one can see who she really is, and she becomes emotionally paralyzed. She writes of learning to lie to herself, of using huge amounts of energy to pretend she isn't miserable. Huge amounts of energy to pretend she isn't miserable. Coleman writes, I don't recommend this. It is exhausting and lonely. So in her book, Reflections on Faith and Depression is the subhead under Not Alone, Reflections on Faith and Depression. She makes some recommendations. She says, I want people to notice who's not there, who's not talking, who's not writing, who's not celebrating, the silent. I think maybe I've talked with you about it's one of the most important topics to me, because I tend to be someone, I've said before, when there have been tragic rashes of suicide in my community, and the music community in Austin sees this from time to time, which is why I work with the Sims Foundation in Austin, which is an organization of mental and emotional health for the music community. But when we see these rashes of suicides, people will often post the suicide hotline number on Facebook. And I do that, and many people do that, and it's well-meaning. And what Monica Coleman says is sometimes, and I've heard this from friends too, that rings hollow, because when you're in those depths, that phone number is not enough. And so she asks us to notice who's missing and to reach out. That is a meditation, a way of showing presence, of being present. And I'm talking about this also because it is so important for faith community. There are religious implications for things like mental health and suicide, because some faith traditions call it a sin. Some religions tell people, maybe you grew up in this tradition, that to feel this way is a sin. And therefore, people don't talk about it. And it gets worse. And it's deadly. And so my strong belief as a Unitarian Universalist is that that is one of our life-saving messages. When Christian people talk about what's the saving message, whatever language you want to put around it, as Unitarian Universalists, this is our saving message, that you are loved no matter what, and that no matter how deep your struggle, how close you are to the edge, you are the stars. You are divinity. You love and connect all of us. So we be able to talk about these hard things in church. Our LGBTQ youth are 4 times more likely to have suicide than their heterosexual peers. Suicide is the second leading cause of death among college students and adults ages 15 to 34. The pandemic has made it harder. And some of us have forgotten, all of us basically out of practice for how we show up and do fundraising. And so what I want to ask you to do is think of it as work. Whatever little bits of barn raising we can do for each other. You saw that video that Russ made, handing a meal, or did we lose everyone? Oh no, there you are. I'm sorry, friends. I'm back. Rusty, will you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me? Okay. Right. Well, I was right in the middle of deep feelings, and then the internet was unstable. So my message to you, in case the internet goes out again, the most important thing that's not going to be, we're going to be taking risks reaching out to each other in this time. We're going to take risks by doing data. What you did, Alice. My understanding is that was the first time many of you met Alex and Liz in person. So whether you're getting together for a barn raising for a joyful reason, like a new baby in an apartment, or whether you're reaching out to someone because they are in the hardest time of their life, this is Unitarian Universalist community ministry that you are doing when you do that. And we are out of practice, but I know that we can do this together. That learning simply to ask people for what they need again, and go ahead and be awkward about it. Can we promise each other that we'll go ahead and be awkward about it, and we'll get back into this practice? So the last thing I want to share with you before we sing a song is actually about a song. Have any of you seen Won't You Be My Neighbor, the documentary about Mr. Rogers? It's really good. And in that documentary, surprisingly, first of all, Fred Rogers was a community minister. Some of you may know that. He was an ordained minister, and his show was his ministry. So when Fred Rogers retired from that show, his wife reported that he really struggled with depression. And this was a cheery guy, right? He was smiling and singing, just putting on his shoes on that show. But purpose is such a big part of what keeps our spirits up. And so when he retired, he really struggled with his purpose and also with loneliness, right? He lost his team. And that was a lot of us in the pandemic. We lost our team in a way. We struggled with our purpose. And so to know that even someone as, known to be joyous as Fred Rogers struggled with that really touched my heart. And there's a short video where Daniel Tiger, the character who really represented Fred on the show, he sings this song, and the lyrics go, "Often I wonder if I'm a mistake. I'm not supposed to be scared, am I? Sometimes I cry and sometimes I shake, wondering if it's true that the strong break. I'm not like anyone else I know. I'm not like anyone else." And so that's Mr. Rogers basically himself as Daniel Tiger. And then here's what his friend does. His friend, Lady Aberlin, sings back to him, "I think you're fine just as you are. I really must tell you, I do like the person you're becoming. You are my friend. Quiet or shaking or dreaming or breaking, there's no one mistaking it. You're my best friend." And what I love about this moment between Daniel Tiger, AKA Fred Rogers, and Lady Aberlin is that they sing kind of interlocked over each other, and the duet doesn't solve anything. Daniel Tiger doesn't change his tune. He doesn't say, "Okay, I'm fine now. You fixed me." No, but they are together. She doesn't leave. He doesn't pretend. She accompanies him in how he's feeling. And she affirms that she loves him just the way he is. And that duet is barn raising too. That moment is church. That is what we are here to do together, to accompany each other through life, letting each other see how we're really feeling, not expecting a quick fix, but accompanying each other through those times. And when you need a barn raising, letting people do that with you. And when someone else needs one and you've got the capacity, showing up too. And last but not least, I want to remind you from the anthem, when you need to, just lie down. Just rest. You have nothing to prove to be loved by this community. You have nothing to prove.